I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, new threat, the words President Trump has for Iran, and an assessment of how the war is going. Abortion pill, a new bill hopes to fight against the dangerous drug, plus a mission of hope.
I think that people change when they're believed in, and that is just fertile ground.
The unique way one Catholic group is getting kids off the streets and changing their lives. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast day of Saint Levander of Seville. As the war continues in the Middle East, we begin tonight with a powerful reflection from Pope Leo XIV. He spoke about the importance of the Sacrament of Reconciliation and its power to foster peace and unity.
Verrebbe da chiedersi.
One might well ask, do those Christians who bear grave responsibility in armed conflicts have the humility and courage to make a serious examination of conscience and go to confession? Only a reconciled person is capable of living in an unarmed and disarming way. Those who lay down the weapons of pride and allow themselves to be continually renewed by God's forgiveness become agents of reconciliation in everyday life.
The Holy Father made the remarks while speaking to priests and seminarians about the importance of the Sacrament of Reconciliation. President Donald Trump declares we are totally destroying the terrorist regime of Iran, and he issues a new threat specifically about today. Still, Iran continues to fire waves of missiles and drones while the U.S. and Israelis strike thousands of sites across the Islamic Republic. And tragically, more American service members have been killed. White House correspondent Owen Jensen brings us an update. Owen.
Veronica, good evening to you. President Donald Trump also says Iran's leaders have been wiped from the face of the earth. And the Pentagon reports more than 15,000 enemy targets have been struck. That's more than 1,000 a day since the war began.
The war with Iran leaves more destruction. Video shows rescue workers on site at the aftermath of a missile strike in northern Israel. And taking to Truth Social at the White House, President Donald Trump posts, "We have unparalleled firepower, unlimited ammunition, and plenty of time. Watch what happens to these deranged scumbags today."
In fact, today will be, yet again, the highest volume of strikes that America has put over the skies of Iran and Tehran. The number of sorties and number of bomber pulses, the highest yet, ramping up and only up.
At the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, also tells reporters the U.S. is decimating Iran's military.
Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective, devastated.
And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with this assessment.
We've made progress, but Iran still has the capability to harm friendly forces and commercial shipping.
The U.S. also suffers more casualties. A KC-135 refueling aircraft crashed in western Iraq, killing all 6 crew members. The other aircraft involved landed safely. Secretary Hegseth called them American heroes and said they would be greeted at Dover for a dignified transfer.
War is hell. War is chaos. And as we saw yesterday with the tragic crash of our KC-135 tanker, bad things can happen.
Meanwhile, a large explosion striking Tehran, where a state-organized rally was being held. Thousands of people took to the streets chanting, "Death to Israel and death to America."
People came out today to tell the enemy that we are not afraid. The people responded to the sound of explosions with chants of Allahu Akbar. To the enemy's dismay, the people will not leave the scene, and victory is near.
And during an event today in North Carolina, Vice President J.D. Vance also speaks out about the war with Iran.
I want all of us to say a prayer, not just for the North Carolinians, but for the people of all of our 50 states who put on the uniform and are willing to sacrifice for the safety and security and freedom of the United States of America.
And Veronica, tonight the U.S. is offering rewards of up to $10 million for information on key leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. You can go to, it's on your screen, rewardsforjustice.net. Veronica?
And Owen, amid the Iran war, Ukraine not happy with the U.S. waiver on Russian oil sanctions intended to calm the markets?
That's right, Veronica. Ukrainian President Zelensky says it'll only help Russia to help them buy more weapons, but the U.S. says it'll keep prices low and promote stability. Veronica, back to you.
Thanks. Correspondent Owen Jensen reporting tonight from the White House. Now joining us to give his assessment of how the war is playing out after 2 weeks is Admiral Robert Moret, a retired U.S. Navy Vice Admiral and former director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, now with Syracuse University's Institute for Security Policy and Law. Welcome back, Admiral Moret. First, there's a lot of reports coming out that the new Supreme Leader has been injured. How important do you think it is to have some type of proof of life?
Well, I think, I would kind of frame it more in terms of having a sense of who's in charge in Tehran right now and how the relationship is going between the newly appointed Supreme Leader, who apparently has been injured based on all the reporting I've seen, and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is an important part of the leadership element there. I think, eventually we're going to have some kind of negotiations with whatever leadership emerges in Iran sooner or later. Hopefully it'll be, the word that is usually used is pragmatic. Hopefully there'll be some pragmatic leadership that we can actually have some understandings with, especially about their nuclear program, but also about freedom for the ships going in and out of the Persian Gulf.
Now, the Pentagon has announced more military might heading to the Middle East. This includes warships to the Strait of Hormuz. We're seeing Iran with the potential of laying some mines. How exactly does that work? And do we have any technology or intelligence that could see this happening in real time?
We certainly have intelligence which can collect, all kinds of signals, SIGINT, for example, or other reporting that would confirm whether or not the mines are already there in the Straits of Hormuz, as there have been press reports of, and I think the Iranians are claiming they've already laid some mines in the Straits of Hormuz. To also step back from that, it's actually a fairly straightforward mission for the Iranians to pose enough of a threat in the Straits of Hormuz that merchant ships, tankers, container ships, and so forth will not transit there just because of the prohibitive insurance rates. And notwithstanding all the damage, Veronica, that we've done to the Iranian Navy, they still have the capacity of doing that with unmanned surface craft, the unmanned airborne platforms, which could be used to target merchant shipping in the Gulf, and also putting mines in place, not with large naval vessels, but with smaller ones.
Now, we've hit the 2-week mark. What is your assessment so far, and could this end soon?
Yeah, as we've talked about before, Veronica, I think the two big issues, the strategic issues for the war in Iran, are the scope and the duration. The scope, we already know, is extended pretty dramatically all the way from the Eastern Mediterranean to Sri Lanka and just about every place in between. The duration is kind of an unknown. And, there are three people that get to vote for the duration: the United States, Israel, but also the Iranians. And right now, the Iranians may want this to last a little bit longer just based on where they find themselves right now.
Admiral Robert Moret, great to see you again, and thanks so much.
Best wishes, Veronica.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issues a plea for an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon, labeling the war between Israel and Hezbollah as an absolutely dramatic situation.
My strong appeal to both parties, to Hezbollah and to Israel, is for a ceasefire to stop the war and pave the way to find a solution.
Today, a deadly Israeli airstrike hit the coastal city of Sidon in southern Lebanon. At least 8 people are dead and 9 others are wounded, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. Guterres is calling on both parties to stop the fighting and urge for a political solution to restore Lebanon's sovereignty and end the suffering. A pair of attacks hundreds of miles apart are rattling American communities. In Virginia, authorities say 2 Old Dominion University students were hurt and 1 person was killed when a former Virginia National Guardsman and convicted ISIS supporter began shooting on campus. The gunman, who was identified by the FBI as 36-year-old Mohammed Baylor J. Law, was subdued and killed at the scene by the ROTC students. Department of Homeland Security has identified the suspect in yesterday's Michigan synagogue ramming as 41-year-old Ayman Mohammed Ghazali. The Lebanese-born naturalized U.S. citizen was the sole fatality in the incident. The FBI is now officially classifying the attack as a targeted act of anti-Semitic violence. According to an official, Ghazali recently lost 4 family members in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon last week. Joining us now is Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the security preparation at Michigan's Temple Israel is being credited with saving lives. They had the plans in place to deal with this across the country. Do you think we're going to start to see a more aggressive security posture?
Well, you're right that they had a system in place at that synagogue, but the truth is, I don't know of a synagogue in America that doesn't have security guards, that doesn't have strict procedures about who can come in and out. That isn't the case, unfortunately. Fortunately for most houses of worship in this country, that isn't, the norm. It is for the last several years at synagogues. So, do we need to ramp it up? Absolutely. I think targets need to be hardened, but I think the problem here isn't just, let's get more security. I think there are other things we need to do, including much more self-defense training, which I think goes against the grain for many people who just think that this is something that can be taken care of for them. And I think this is also will involve, sort of an aggressive program of exercising Second Amendment rights. But the main issue is what's behind this. Why is this happening? Who's inciting it? And why are so many people, quite frankly, in American society complacent about it and enabling it?
When you highlight that, do you think lawmakers could be doing more to protect the Jewish community?
Well, there are things that can be done. I think to the extent that the Department of Homeland Security is helping to increase security at places which are, in the crosshairs of hate crimes. But, I don't really think this is a matter of legislation. This is a matter of our culture, of what the mainstream media allows, what we call the Overton window of acceptable discourse, and how it has shifted in the last decade, and a general culture, a cultural atmosphere in which it's no longer unacceptable in polite society to express hatred for Jews, contempt for Jewish rights. And if you think that doesn't lead to violence, well, look at what's been happening.
Jonathan Tobin, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Turning now to weather, from a record-shattering heat dome in the Southwest to a polar vortex plunging the Midwest into a deep freeze, the U.S. is facing a literal map of extremes today. To break down this unprecedented weather whiplash and what it means for your weekend, our weather expert Rob Bradley from Weather Nation joins me now. Rob, can you tell us more about the 2 extreme weather systems forecast to hit the U.S. this weekend and next week?
Yeah, absolutely. The Midwest is going to see a cold and snowy system, while the West Coast deals with one of the most impressive spring ridges of high pressure, one of the more impressive spring heat waves that we could potentially see on record. Across the Midwest, we've been seeing gusty winds already, but that was from the first system. Our next system that comes in this weekend is going to be much colder. It's still going to be windy, but it's going to be very snowy. Some folks like the Twin Cities over to northern Wisconsin have the potential to see upwards of a foot or 2 of snowfall, with winter storm watches and winter storm warnings already in effect for some of these cities. So we go throughout the day on Saturday, the snow slowly builds in, but then into Saturday evening, Sunday, and Monday, we could potentially see blizzard conditions for some areas, with a foot or 2 of snow possible for locations across Minnesota, Wisconsin, into portions of northern Michigan. So we're looking at real-time winter conditions, big-time winter conditions for these areas across the Midwest as we go into the end of the weekend and early next week. Now, across the West Coast, bit of a different story. We have this big trough digging for the Midwest, but on the West Coast, it's the opposite. Massive ridge of high pressure, which could bring us all-time record highs for the month of March for numerous areas. Los Angeles expected to get up to nearly 100 degrees for multiple days in a row, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. Denver, Colorado could be pushing 90 degrees, which has never happened before in the month of March. San Francisco as well could hit 90 degrees, never happened before in the month of March. So big contrast between either coast going into the weekend and next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Pro-life policy.
They are very dangerous. There are significant complications. Hemorrhaging is one of the big ones. They can create future infertility as well. And right now, the FDA is handing this out like candy.
Learn about the new legislation proposed to ban the abortion pill. Major new pro-life bill now before Congress. Senator Josh Hawley has introduced legislation to ban the popular abortion pill Mifepristone. The bill seeks to revoke its approval by the Food and Drug Administration. Senator Hawley argues the medication poses serious health risks to women and should no longer be on the market. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with the latest. Eric, what's behind this push?
Well, it is interesting, Veronica. Good to be with you. Chemical abortions have become the most popular method of ending early pregnancies in the United States. It now accounts for nearly 70% of all abortions nationwide. About 7.5 million women have used Mifepristone since the pill was first approved by the FDA in 2000. Now, Senator Josh Hawley says Congress must act and ban Mifepristone from the market.
We are here today to issue a call to action, to call on the United States Congress to stand up and to protect the innocent unborn, to protect the health and safety of women whose lives are endangered, abortion drug known as Mifepristone.
Pro-life lawmakers claim the FDA's safeguards on Mifepristone were dismantled under Democratic administrations and needs to be restored. They say an estimated 11% of women suffer medical complications after using the drug. Kansas Senator Roger Marshall, an OBGYN doctor, says he has treated a number of these women.
They are very dangerous. There are significant complications. Hemorrhaging is one of the big ones. They can create future infertility as well. And right now, the FDA is handing this out like candy.
Senator Marshall adds Mifepristone is available through the mail without a doctor's visit. One woman says she nearly died after taking the pill and was left with permanent damage.
Eventually, the damage was so extensive that doctors had no choice but to perform a partial hysterectomy. In one moment, my ability to carry children in the future was taken from me, not by choice, but by necessity to save my life.
The Trump administration is conducting its own review of Mifepristone's safety. Democrats say Republicans are just panning to their base and add abortion pills are safe to use.
It's not because they care about women's health. It is because medication abortion using Mifepristone is the most common method of abortion in the U.S. And Trump and his anti-abortion allies want to ban abortion nationwide.
And by the way, the FDA is firing back. A statement on their website says the agency approved the pill more than 20 years ago based on thorough and comprehensive review of scientific evidence and has determined it is safe and effective for abortion use. Senator Hawley tells me that he's anxious to debate the issue in committee coming very soon. Veronica, back to you.
Thanks, Eric. Dr. Paul McHugh is a man before his time for his views on the transgender debate. For decades, the former head of the Department of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins warned of the dangers surrounding gender ideology. EWTN News In Depth spoke to the 94-year-old about his groundbreaking research.
I kept saying, look, we're two things here. We have the facts of the body and we got the ideas of the patient. And instead of building our program upon the sex facts, we were generating more concern about the ideas.
You can watch the interview tonight on EWTN News in Depth at 8 p.m. Eastern or on our YouTube page at youtube.com/EWTN News. Up next on EWTN News, mass exodus. Christians are leaving the Middle East in droves, how the remaining few keep the faith alive, and how people are finding hope at a garbage dump in Mexico City. In the Middle East, Christians are already a minority. In recent years, violence and unrest has reduced the number of faithful even further. EWTN News' Rodi Sher examines the impact of war and instability on the Christian population.
In the Middle East, church bells still ring, but in many places, they ring over shrinking congregations, emptied neighborhoods, and communities fighting simply to remain. Christian leaders across the region are warning that migration, conflict, and uncertainty are pushing one of the world's oldest Christian presence toward a dangerous tipping point. Since the dawn of Christianity, this region has been home to an unbroken witnesses of prayer, worship, and sacrifice, but decades of war have turned ancient Christian homelands into corridors of displacement. Today, church leaders continue to sound the alarm. Rising immigration, recurring conflict, and deepening instability are threatening the future of Christians in the very lands where the gospel first spread. Nowhere is that decline clearer than in Iraq. Since 2003, the country's Christian population has collapsed from roughly 1.5 million to well under 200,000. And in August 2014, ISIS's assault on the Nineveh plains triggered one of the largest forced displacement of Christians in modern Middle Eastern history. In Syria, the story is much the same. Before the civil war, Christians were estimated at around 10% of the population. Today, many estimates place them closer to 2%. After years of violence, insecurity, and mass migration, emptied historic communities that once filled churches and city streets with daily life and prayer. In Lebanon, long seen as a center of Christian life in the Arab world, the pressure is increasingly economic and social. Christians are not longer a majority, and the country's prolonged financial collapse, worsened by the 2020 Beirut port explosion, has pushed many young people to look abroad for stability, work, and dignity. And in the Holy Land, where Christianity's roots runs deepest, the community continues to shrink. In Jerusalem, Christians make up only a small fraction of the population. In Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christ, decades of immigration have dramatically reduced the Christian share of the city, as many families seek opportunities beyond checkpoints, barriers, and uncertainty. For many Christians across the region, the choice is no longer between staying and leaving, it's between survival and disappearance. Between the silence of empty churches and the departure of yet another generation, the question facing the Middle East is no longer only political or demographic. For many Christians here, it's existential, whether this region will remain a home for all its peoples, or whether one of its oldest faith communities will survive only in memory. For EWTN News, this is Rodi Sher.
Outreach to the poorest and most marginalized is at the heart of the church's mission. This reality is lived out by many organizations and groups around the world, including Hope for the Poor. Members walk with families on the streets and in landfills to share Christ's love through service. EWTN Vatican journalist Paula Flynn has more.
At the Bordo landfill near Mexico City, groups of children who have fallen into drug addiction live alongside homeless families, living in poor hygienic conditions, often without running water or electricity. Thousands survive by scavenging for recyclable materials in the dumps. For the members of Hope of the Poor, these men, women, and children are family. Their founder, Craig Jorin, who recently met Pope Leo XIV to share the project, describes it as a mission to bring hope to the lonely and discarded.
What I've done over the years is to help the kids to start to go to school. and to give them school uniforms, school supplies, and so that they could go to school and have everything they needed to get an education, because the way out of the landfill is for the kids to get an education. And today many are out of the street, out of drugs, and working a full-time job.
Do you think they will come back to their communities and try to make a change themselves?
Oh, absolutely, because I believe the gospel works when people give it away. Almost all of my staff are former drug users. They're people who grew up as street kids on the street. They survived, and now they've left their addictions and now working for Hope of the Poor to help other people. And they can give a testimony of their life change and really give hope to someone on the street that they can change.
Each year, about 450 volunteers from the United States travel to Mexico on mission with Hope of the Poor. The organization has already supported more than 120 families, providing food, helping them find work, and assisting in their rehabilitation, and serves more than 250 homeless people outside the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, often under the puzzled gaze of passers-by.
They would look at us like we were crazy because we're just there with the street kids at an intersection, and we're just there with 2 chickens and some hot sauce and some tortillas and just hanging out with them, sharing a meal. But really what we're doing is building trust with them so then we could help them have a new life.
Through their work, Joreen explained, they hope to inspire more people and generations to bring love and hope to the hopeless.
I think that people change when they're believed in, and that is just fertile ground for people to just be all that God is making them to be.
In Rome, Paola Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.